Reporter Mark Kellogg was chasing the story of a lifetime in the summer of 1876 in Montana Territory, but he had to die to get it. On June 21st, just days before the Battle of the Little Bighorn, he wired his publisher a final dispatch. "We leave the Rosebud tomorrow, and by the time this reaches you, we will have met and fought the Red Devils, with what results remain to be seen. I go with Custer and will be at the death." His words carried an eerie sense of prophecy. The phrase "at the death" likely referred to the finish of a fox hunt, but fate gave it a much darker meaning. When Custer and his men were wiped out on June 25th, Kellogg was among the dead. His death sealed his place in history and, more importantly for him, ensured financial support for his motherless daughters. Born in Brighton, Ontario on the 31st of March, 1831, Marcus Henry Kelogg arrived as the third offspring among what would eventually total 10 children in his family. His family moved often across the U.S.-Canadian border before finally settling in La Crosse, Wisconsin, where his father ran the Kellogg House Hotel. Mark became a skilled telegrapher, first with the Northwestern Telegraph Company, then with the Atlantic and Pacific Telegraph Company. In 1861, he married Martha J. Robinson, and together they had 2 daughters. During the Civil War, Kellogg juggled work as a telegrapher and as a writer for the La Crosse Democrat. He even played shortstop on the town's baseball team and ran, unsuccessfully, for city clerk. Tragedy struck in 1867 when Martha died. With little choice, Kellogg sent his daughters to live with their aunt, Martha's sister, Lily Robinson. Under the pen name Frontier, he frequently filed stories as a stringer for the St. Paul Dispatch while traveling the upper Midwest as a reporter and editor. He sold stories to larger Eastern newspapers, just like many Western correspondents do. He even made a failed run for the Minnesota legislature. By 1873, Kellogg was living in Bismarck, Dakota Territory. That year, he helped Civil War veteran Clement A. Lounsbury establish the Bismarck Tribune, the first newspaper in the territory. Kellogg occasionally filled in as editor, but mostly served as an attaché of the Tribune, as Lounsbury put it. It paid the bills, but not enough to raise 2 daughters and support their aunt. As Frontier, Kellogg echoed the dominant pro-expansion sentiment of the day. In 1875, after native warriors killed a homesteader near Fort Abraham Lincoln, Kellogg's column in the St. Paul Daily Pioneer Press read, "I say, turn the dogs of war loose and drive them off the face of the earth if they do not behave themselves." When word spread in spring 1876 that Custer and the 7th Cavalry were preparing to campaign against the Lakota and Cheyenne, Lounsbury had intended to go along and report. But his wife fell ill, and Kellogg went in his place. Some accounts suggest another reason, that Kellogg, by chance, had traveled on the same Northern Pacific train as George and Libby Custer earlier that year. Stranded for days in deep snowdrifts, Kellogg had rigged a telegraph line to send word to Fort Abraham Lincoln. Captain Tom Custer soon arrived with a sleigh to rescue his brother and sister-in-law. That act earned Kellogg the trust of the Custer family. By this time, Kellogg was aging, his hair grayed, spectacles perched on his nose, and he needed one big story to secure his reputation and provide for his daughters. Riding on Custer's fame, he secured a coveted contract with the New York Herald, James Gordon Bennett Jr.'s flamboyant, high-paying newspaper that had bankrolled world-famous expeditions, including Henry Stanley's search for Dr. David Livingstone in Africa. Custer, too, needed redemption. He had recently angered President Ulysses S. Grant by testifying about corruption in military trading posts implicating Grant's brother. Stripped of command, Custer had to lean on Generals Sherman, Sheridan, and Terry to get the 7th Cavalry assignment back. Despite Sherman's orders banning reporters, Custer allowed Kellogg to join. Kellogg's dispatches reflected his gratitude. On June 21st, he wrote admiringly of Custer. The only event that happened during the expedition was General Custer's demonstration of proficient rifle shooting, which resulted in him taking down an antelope at 400 yards and almost blasting the heads off of many sage hens. The next day they reached the Little Bighorn, and within days Kellogg's pen fell silent forever. Mark Kellogg, serving as the Herald's correspondent, rode into the campaign mounted on a mule. In his canvas saddlebags he carried paper, pencils, sugar, coffee, and bacon, enough supplies to last 2 weeks. A fellow journalist later wrote that Kellogg was full of hope they would catch up to the Indians on the march and witness a major fight. When scouts reported the size of the Indian village, Kellogg struggled to keep pace with Custer's advance party. Riding his mule, he asked his friend Fred Girard, Custer's civilian interpreter for the Arikara Scouts and an occasional news correspondent, for the loan of a pair of spurs. Girard agreed, but cautioned Kellogg to stay back with the main column. Neither Kellogg's mount nor his riding skills, Girard warned, seemed suited for what might lie ahead. Kellogg, however, insisted he was expecting interesting developments and pressed forward with Custer. Nobody can say with certainty what transpired next. Girard survived, having left Custer's immediate command before the final push, but Kellogg did not. 4 days after the battle, soldiers discovered the body of a civilian in the tall grass near the Little Bighorn. According to Colonel John Gibbon, the attire was not appropriate for a soldier. The man was missing an ear and had been partially scalped. Survivors recognized him as Kellogg by a distinctive strap fastened to one boot. It's likely his mule panicked at the gunfire, throwing him into harm's way, where he was struck down. His long Napoleonic-style sideburns may even explain why one ear was cut away. On July 6, 1876, the Bismarck Tribune, Kellogg's actual employer under Clement Lounsbury, was the first newspaper in the world to break the full story of the Custer massacre, complete with a casualty list. The Tribune's telegraph office sent a dispatch east to Kellogg's secondary employer, the New York Herald. That single transmission ran 15,000 words and cost $3,000 in 19th century money. Thanks to Kellogg's tragic end, the Herald beat every other paper east of the Mississippi. Its publisher, James Gordon Bennett Jr., claimed Kellogg as his own correspondent and, true to his reputation for both extravagance and flair, sent $2,000 to support Kellogg's 2 daughters and their aunt. In the 1920s, old residents of La Crosse remembered how Bennett went even further, arranging for Lily Robinson, Kellogg's sister-in-law, to receive $100 each month for the girls' care and education, and granting each daughter $5,000 upon reaching adulthood. Mark Kellogg may have been in the wrong place at the wrong time, but he accomplished what he set out to do, securing the future of his daughters. Whatever his fate at the Little Bighorn, to his family, Kellogg was nothing short of a hero.